Yeah, but see, here's the thing. When I did my video on too much content, I was talking about in general. I don't think that there's too much in one specific area.
Wow.
What's up, everybody? My name is MichaelStephenson. Welcome to my YouTube channel. You are currently watching my art/entertainment industry series, in which I talk mainly about film and television with a little sprinkling of publishing as well as music in there. Talk about why things feel different than they have before. If this is your first video here and this is your first time on the channel, I would ask that you please go back and watch some of my previous videos. Some of those videos are foundational videos, so I'm trying to form a particular lingo or language here on the channel so that we all can have a shorthand going forward, so that hopefully these videos get shorter and shorter as time goes on, to where I can just mention my shorthand and you can understand what I'm saying when I say things like the Avatar era or the Lost Effect or Trailer Park, things of that nature. So again, please go back and watch those if you could be so kind as to spare the time. So tonight I wanted to talk a bit about something that I have heard, and this is something that both Bob Iger as well as some of the executives at Marvel have come out and addressed very recently. And I think like within the last 2, maybe even 3 weeks, they've addressed this. And that is the idea of Disney Plus kind of watering down or affecting the Marvel brand in some way. So first off, let's just get it out of the way right up front. My thesis is that no, I don't fully agree with what they are saying, and honestly with what a lot of you guys as the fans are saying, because a lot of you guys are agreeing with it. Now, let me backtrack and say that I do have a video on too much content. In that video, I talk about the era of peak TV, or what I'm calling peak TV. I know it's technically a different definition than what I give in that video, but I think that the idea of there being too much content is definitely a thing that we need to discuss, and that we need to actually look at as an industry. And then on top of that, we also as fans need to look at it of how much stuff we are consuming and the way that we're consuming it. But with that being said, do I think that currently Marvel in any way, shape, or form is suffering through too much content when it comes to using their brand and things of that nature? Honestly, the answer is, as I just said, no. And so there are a few reasons as to why I think that way. So first off, this notion has been around for a long time, that if you give too much content, ultimately it will water down a specific brand. This was and has been said for a long time about Star Wars, is that some people who like Star Wars, who are super fans of Star Wars, have said that, well, one of the reasons why the first couple of movies, episodes 4, 5, and 6, one of the reasons why they felt so special is because there wasn't really a whole lot of other content to go with them. You just had those 3 movies, and then you had like a lot of toys coming out, and then you did have that one Christmas special, and people made fun of the Christmas special, whatever. But with that, the notion that less was far more sort of started to come into play when it came to the art and entertainment industry specifically. Now, again, you have to understand that I know a lot of people will say that, well, the whole less is more thing has been around for years. Yes, but it never fully hit the film and television industry, not really in the way that you would think it would have or should have. We all know that Hollywood loves different eras, and we get obsessed with doing particular stories and storylines. So when there was the Western era, everybody was doing Westerns. There were Westerns everywhere. It seemed like you couldn't escape going to see a Western or seeing a Western on TV. They were everywhere, right? So this whole less is more thing, it was not something that Hollywood thrived on. So now we're in the comic book and superhero era. Well, it's one of the many eras that's going on. We're also in the Avatar era, as I've said in one of my previous videos, the Avatar era. But we are in this comic book and superhero era, and it feels like everything is geared toward superheroes or to comic books in some way. But number one, I guarantee you that it's really not. It's really not. There are still, let's say, out of 12 months of the year, I could see someone saying that, oh my God, it just feels like everything is comic books and or superheroes. If you never were able to get a single month off from having to watch or see or hear about a comic book or superhero movie. Now, yes, while it may seem like a lot of people don't ever get a month off from hearing that, that's mainly because of the fan base is so active and so rabid online and in other venues and other forums that they talk about this stuff ad nauseum, even when nothing is actually out in theaters, right? For instance, right now it's March 2024, just in case you're watching this well into the future. There is no comic book superhero movie out right now that I can think of. Madam Web, that came out in February. It didn't do well. It didn't really hit on anything. I'm trying to think of anything that would be out right now. And again, yes, we've had years to where it felt like there were far more, and there were a lot more comic book and superhero films. Even last year, you had Guardians of the Galaxy, you had Ant-Man and the Wasp, and you had the Marvels, right? But you have to remember that most fans almost always delineated or divided those things up between Marvel and DC. That there was a very there was a very stern line between the two of them, and so you kind of only went to watch one, and you didn't necessarily go to watch the other one. So for DC, we also had Shazam, and we had The Flash and Aquaman. I think those were the three. Even then, though, considering it 12 months out of the year, that only makes for 6 films between 2 studios. That means that for at least 6 months of the year, no, you didn't have a superhero film, at least not any that I can remember. Again, this whole idea of, oh man, there's just superheroes everywhere and you can't avoid them and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Not necessarily true. Not necessarily true. So then you go back to some of the things that were being said by the executives. And one of the things that were being said by the executives is that they felt that creating a lot of material for Disney Plus, which was their mandate. They were given that mandate by, I think, Bob himself, by Mr. Iger at Disney, that they needed to create as much content for Disney Plus as they could in order to bolster Disney Plus's content, well, to bolster the level of content so that they would have a certain level of adults who actually wanted to get Disney Plus and not just parents, right? So there are people who get Disney Plus but don't have kids at all, but they want to see the Marvel content. Those were sort of the customers that they really wanted to get and retain. So they were given a mandate that make as much content as you possibly can for Disney Plus. And they ended up making quite a bit of content. But even then, when you consider the level of content that they could have made that would normally be in almost any other era of television outside of the one that we're currently in, there would be way more stuff that they created. Like I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe this. So first off, we know that pretty much all TV shows now, and I've talked about this in yet another video where I talk about season lengths, right? The lengths of TV shows and whatnot. We know that almost all TV shows now, especially the high-end prestige TV shows, they're barely anything. They stay around for like so little time that it doesn't even feel like they were really around. And this is probably one of the reasons as to why super popular stuff doesn't seem to stay in the zeitgeist or stay within the realm of release for very long. But the MCU has been able to do that because they are a brand in and of themselves. It's not just 1 or 2 movies. The reason why is because, again, the seasons are kind of too short. So yeah, they had quite a few series that they made for Disney Plus, but the majority of the series can be watched, even if 1 episode released per week, the majority of these series could be watched in a matter of 2 months, and that's it. And then you can go on, and some of them, it wasn't even 2 months. Some of them, they only had like 6 episodes. It would be a month and a half at that. You're talking about a month and a half in which the episodes are somewhere around 50 minutes. So that's what, 300 minutes of time over the course of a month and a half? Like that's nothing. It's nothing. It's not even a full 6 hours. For us to say that, oh my God, it was just too much content. It was too much content. But then you look around at almost everything else, and other TV shows, they have, I mean, other TV shows have just multiple seasons in which they have so much content in them that it's laughable to think that these shows, which play out for such a small amount of time, could somehow be watering down the brand so much to where it's like, oh my God, they're making everything terrible now. We've seen these characters for too much, for too long. We know every single thing about them, yada yada yada, et cetera, et cetera. Like, tell that to the people who still watch traditional TV and they watch stuff like Grey's Anatomy or Law and Order SVU, or I don't know, just pick almost any show not made within the last 10 years, and you will find that they had way more episodes. And no, those shows did not automatically water down the brand. It's weird to me, too, to think that when you go to another show that was super popular and that was a prestige show, that being Game of Thrones, for the first, not even couple, for like the first 5 or even 6 seasons of Game of Thrones, and it ultimately had 8 seasons, right? For the first 5 or 6 seasons of Game of Thrones, it routinely had 10 episodes. There's only been maybe one Marvel series that has had 10 episodes. Like, Game of Thrones routinely had 10 episodes. And then on top of that, by the time we got to the later seasons, they started to cut their episode order, and the fans were like, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? We like, now everything feels like it's being rushed. We actually needed more episodes. That's one of the biggest complaints with Game of Thrones, is that a lot of people felt that the final couple of seasons or final few seasons felt rushed, and they missed the dependability of having 10 episodes over and over and over again. So this idea that, and from what I can remember, the longest Disney Plus series so far has been WandaVision, which I think topped out at 9 episodes, I think, per season, mind you, per season. When you think about the amount of episodes in these seasons, as opposed to almost every other TV series out there, it's just laughable and comical to think that, oh yeah, this is watering down the brand because people are seeing too many, they're seeing these stars too often. Like, no. That has nothing to do with it. More than anything, what has to do with this idea of watering down the brand is the exact same thing that I've talked about also in the whole stars sort of permutation. Well, that's not really what I want to do, but it's almost like the star power these days is permeable between what used to be that movie and television barrier. Okay. So there's this story that Denzel Washington sometimes tells. So for those of you who don't know, Denzel Washington actually used to be on TV. And he was an up-and-coming actor. This was in the early mid 80s. And one of the people that took a sort of liking to him was Sidney Poitier. Now, Sidney Poitier, he's a black actor. He's very respected. He was a very distinguished gentleman. He was in the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? He got Oscar nominated, all that stuff for that film. He was, like a lot of black actors, since we are a very small group, he wanted to mentor Denzel. Denzel was open to being mentored, and of course that turned out incredibly well for Denzel. But one of the things that he told Denzel a long time ago, and this is before Denzel, I believe this was before he really took off as a true blue star, is that Denzel was on a show, I think it was called either Saint Elsewhere or Saint Elmo's or something like that. It has Saint in the name. And I discussed this earlier in another video as well, which, as an aside, I don't know if you guys know it, but it always is funny to me when people point out that, like, when something super weird happens and they point out that, like, wow, this is the timeline that we're on. This is the world that we're living in. Like, guys, I don't know if y'all know this, but we're on the timeline, and we've been on it since well before I was born, in which Denzel Washington and, wait for it, Howie Mandel came off of the same TV show. Like, the Howie Mandel, the judge off of America's Got Talent. Howie Mandel, the stand-up comedian. It's just like, you would never think that You just would never think that seeing the two of them that they've been in anything together, let alone worked together on a TV show. But yes, that's where we are. So back to Sidney Poitier. Sidney Poitier gave Denzel some advice, and he said basically, look, if you are going to, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said something to the extent of, if you are going to give yourself away for free during the week, then don't expect for people to pay to see you during the weekend or on the weekend. And mind you, this is back when most TV, or at least most good TV, was still free. Now, of course, we have a completely different paradigm. Pretty much all TV you have to pay for in some way, shape, or form, right? But back then, most people who watched TV were still watching broadcast television. Denzel was on a show in which he played a doctor. He worked in a hospital. It's sort of like, a Grey's Anatomy type thing, or Chicago Med. And he was a doctor on there. And he got off of that show, and it doesn't seem like he ever looked back. He went from television to movie star. And so my whole point is that, and this used to be what a lot of actors and stars used to do, or at least tried to do. The jump was not always successful for every person who came off of a successful TV show. My point is that the idea of Marvel's content, their Disney Plus content, watering down, or in some ways bringing down the quality of the brand name of Marvel, it was not due to the actual quality of the shows, nor even was it due to the quantity or the amount of shows that they had, but rather it was due to who was actually on the shows. For instance, if I'm being honest with myself, I think that, and you guys can disagree, et cetera, but in my opinion, I'm under the impression that the best year that the Marvel shows had on Disney Plus was the first year. And in the first year, they released four series: WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I'm gonna have to have. There's a whole video that I have on Falcon and Winter Soldier, because I really don't understand why a lot of fans seem to hate it so much. I just got done watching The Punisher, and I'm like, this is kind of the same thing. It's just in a slightly different, more heavier format. That's a whole nother video in and of itself. But WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Loki season 1, and then it ended with a Hawkeye. And I'm like, that was probably the most successful year. Now, again, some people didn't particularly care for Hawkeye all that much either, but there's a whole like the different ways that people feel about Hawkeye. There are so many different groups or small percentages of groupings of niche groups on why they didn't or did like Hawkeye. And none of them, well, not none of them, most of them have nothing to do with the actual quality. Like, there's people who don't like Hawkeye because they wanted a show solely about when he was playing Ronin during the 5 years that his family was gone. Then some people don't like Hawkeye because it showed I don't even remember her name, to be honest with you, because I only watched that series once. But it showed the younger Hawkeye, this girl who's going to sort of take on the mantle of Hawkeye. Some people loved it because it finally said that, holy crap, Daredevil, Wilson Fisk, all that stuff, they are legitimately now part of canon. So that was the first time that we saw them being canon. Some people even liked it because they did like the character of Echo, how she was introduced and all that stuff. And so, I don't know. A lot of the conversation around that show is interesting just because, like I said, it doesn't seem like a whole lot of it was based around the quality of the show, but just based around people not liking things because they wanted this specific story to play out, and it didn't. But anyways, back to it. It wasn't because, oh my God, they had 4 shows that year that everybody was just like, oh man, it's too much Marvel, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Now, yes, mind you, that was also in a year in which I don't think, because wasn't that in 2020 or was it in 2021? I feel like they sort of bled into one into the other, but I don't think they had as many movies that year. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe it was solely in 2021, in which case they had 4 movies in 2021 too. So I don't know, but like I said, it wasn't the quality nor the quantity of the shows, but rather who was on them, in my opinion. The fact that the movie stars were also on the TV shows, to me, is what sort of tarnished what Disney Plus was, well, what Marvel was doing in general. And I've spoken about this before. Having the movie characters also appear on the shows made it feel like, well, this is just sequels to the movies. Like it was almost extended mini movies for these different side characters. But then they compounded the problem of, yeah, we're going to have legitimate movie stars or movie celebrities. Again, there aren't too many real stars anymore. We are going to have real movie celebrities appear in the shows. They compounded that with the fact that not only did they have these in shows, but then they made the TV shows basically appointment viewing. Now, I've discussed this in another video as well, to where we are in this era in which the standalone anything kind of no longer exists. Like, first off, let me mention this, is that I already said this in the Marvel Miss Focus video, which if you haven't seen that, please go check that one out. I've covered 3 things that I think that we as fans have been sort of focused a little bit too much on when we are criticizing Marvel. And one of the things that I said in there is that I don't know if anybody else remembers this, and maybe I made it up or I dreamed it up somehow, but I distinctly remember that there was some news that came out some years ago. This is, quite a while ago, maybe right after Endgame came out or maybe during the pandemic. I'm not sure, but it came out, and I'm going to continue to stick with this story until somebody corrects me on it and says that, no, this was never a thing. But Marvel, some of the executives at Marvel and Disney came out and said that they wanted for these next few phases to not have to focus in so much on the Avengers. And they wanted to do a lot of standalone films. I mention that because, again, a lot of the fans have come and said that you kind of don't like that at this point, that you don't like that there's a lot of focus on just a bunch of new characters and no Avengers team, and it doesn't even feel like they've built to an Avengers team. It just feels like it's a whole bunch of standalone movies. And I'm like, well, that, from what I can remember, that was sort of what they wanted to do. They wanted to focus in on a bunch of new characters and have real standalone films so that every film is not connected to every other film. The problem is that the films are no longer as connected, but the TV shows are connected to the films. So yeah, you can go see Eternals as a standalone film, but you can't really see Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, the film, without first having seen WandaVision, the show. So you have to sit through however long WandaVision was. I know it was 9 episodes, but I can never remember if the episodes were 30 minutes or 50 or somewhere in between. You have to sit through that whole thing before he can really see and fully understand Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and what's going on there. Like, why is Wanda even calling herself a witch now all of a sudden? There's a huge disconnect between the end of Endgame and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness that WandaVision bridges. But again, making the TV shows, basically making the movies be subservient in some ways to the TV shows, is not how this thing should go. I remember years ago, John Campea, and I've already told my John Campea story thing about how I didn't know his name and all this stuff. So this was some years ago. I can't remember which way it was, but they were doing AMC Movie Talk Mailbag, I believe. And one of the people wrote in, and he was asking, I want to say it was something about Stephen King's The Stand. So Stephen King's The Stand, it's a very famous, one of his more famous novels that he's done. I think it was written or it came out in the 80s. It had a miniseries in the 90s. It also had a newer miniseries recently. So this is before that newer miniseries was made. And they were still talking about making a theatrical release film for this, The Stand. And somebody wrote in and they were like, they asked the question between film and television. And I think they wanted to go, it's hard for me to remember specifically what it was, but John made a great point. His point basically was that you can go from the giant budget of like a film into a TV series. You sort of start a TV series like that. But it's kind of weird to go the opposite direction, to have a television show and then do a movie, or he was either making that point or he was making the opposite point, that it's weird to go from a movie to television show. I can't remember which one, But in any case, in both directions, it's actually a fair point to make. Now, yes, you occasionally will get things like Sex and the City. They went from TV show to film, and they actually did quite well. But rarely do you want to have the two things cross and have the same actors and actresses in the thing. It's different if you're like rebooting a thing, rebooting something, right? So you can take a TV show like Mission Impossible, the original, and then reboot it into a film franchise like what Tom Cruise did. But it would be weird if you took a movie and you have movie stars and now they're just on TV every week. And I think that's sort of what played out with the Marvel Disney Plus TV shows, is that we got so used to these characters and even these actors and actresses to some extent being larger than life, seen on our massive screens, and only having a certain amount of time with them, that once we got a crap ton more of time, it just sort of felt off. And it gave us more time to maybe not like them, maybe not like the actors that are playing the roles, maybe not like the characters and the way that they are written, etc., etc. I think that was something that impacted us the most. And then, of course, the fact that we had to sit through these shows if we even wanted to halfway enjoy the films. That was another thing that it wasn't even that, again, it wasn't the quality of the TV shows or anything like that. Because if I'm being honest, like I said, WandaVision and Loki, they still to me are two of the best. I love Miss Marvel as well. I thought that Falcon and Winter Soldier, I thought that it was decent. I thought that it was actually pretty good. And Hawkeye was just okay. I would have to watch it again, but I never really took much stock in Hawkeye as a character anyway. So, it was sort of a gimme in my opinion. I could go either way with it. Then you had Moon Knight. Moon Knight was interesting. I find it kind of funny that what's his name? Dang it, y'all know his name. Same dude who played Poe in Poe Dameron in Star Wars. I kind of find it funny that they somehow keep putting this dude in the Egyptian deserts, like in Egypt, somewhere over in the Middle East, when like he's Hispanic or Latino, I believe. Like, it's funny to me because again, he played Apocalypse. And for those of y'all who don't remember that movie, I wish I could not remember that terrible X-Men movie, but he played Apocalypse. So I'm like, when is he going to escape the Egyptian deserts? But then on top of that, Disney, and it's interesting because Disney most studios have this, but Disney specifically has this in spades, because we know that the dude from The Bear, he is going to be playing the Thing in the new Fantastic Four, but that he also played in the other Marvel series, The Punisher. He was in the first season of The Punisher. So Marvel has used this guy before, and this was even when they were under the Disney banner. So he's very familiar with them. And of course, Pedro Pascal himself, he's playing the Mandalorian. Now he's going to be Mr. Fantastic, all that stuff. So I find it interesting that Disney quite literally has a MENA, a Middle East, North African actor in their Rolodex, so to speak. Rolodex, that's outdated. I never even used the Rolodex. And the guy who they got to play Aladdin in their live action Aladdin, like he's sitting right there. But they were like, yeah, let's cast this Latino dude to play this British / Egyptian character. I'm like, okay, whatever. But as I said, and then of course you have What If, the different What If iterations. Let's not talk about Secret Invasion, please. I don't want to go there. But they have had some fairly decent outings as far as TV shows go. It's just, in my opinion, the fact that you can enjoy the TV shows alone, but you can't really enjoy, because you can enjoy Miss Marvel alone, like, you can enjoy Moon Knight alone, but you can't really enjoy the films going forward alone. And they had a slew of those things. And I'm just like, why? I don't get it. I guess you could see Black Widow, but then Black Widow in and of itself did the reverse, to where you kind of had to have seen Black Widow in order to see Hawkeye. It was not the way to go. So if I were talking to Bob and talking to Kevin, I would not say that, oh, you need to scroll back on the things that you're doing for Disney Plus. I think that's actually a wrong move. As I said, or as I will say in my MCU video, I think that they should have all of their younger characters, and I like that they're skewing younger. I talk about that in my MCU video. You see that it's coming up in a few days. They should have all of those characters be on the Disney Plus shows. Y'all can probably cut the budgets like in half. Spending $200 something million on a TV show that's only going to get you so many episodes is ridiculous. I just, yeah, don't do that. Stop doing that. And then they can move forward and still create good content for the MCU on Disney Plus without having to have each show and film be so interwoven that you can't watch one without having watched the previous other in a completely different format. I think that that's the wrong thing to do. So I think I'm going to end that here. I pretty much said most of what I wanted to say about the too much content thing as it concerns Marvel. I do have another video that talks about some of these other things just on a general level outside of Marvel and Disney and all that stuff. Okay, so I don't have a sign. Hey, everybody. So while I don't have an official sign off yet, I guess I should do the whole please like, comment, share, and if you so desire and you want to see more, subscribe. But more importantly, I will ask that you please go and purchase one of my books. They are mostly ebooks and pretty much they are all under $10. See if any of my work is actually any good, if it lives up to any of the things that I'm talking about here on my channel, specifically with the entertainment industry videos. So please go purchase my books. All of my links are down below. Thank you.